Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today's video is going to be a bit of a book haul and a bit of a TBR and a bit of a reading plans type video. This video is about 10 new to me classics authors I wanted to read this year. I've had this list on my phone for a while and over the past few months I've just been adding to it. Every time I saw a new classics author that I thought, you know what, I really should read one of their books, I've added it to my little list on my phone. And the list is now 10 authors long, and so I wanted to tell you who they are and what I'm hoping to read from them. Some of these are authors that have been recommended to me specifically. Some of these are simply authors that I feel I should have read a long time ago. In particular, you'll find a few big names of 20th century American literature on here, which is a part of classic Western literature that I'm really not too familiar with, but want to be, and therefore there's that. I also recently spent some time in the UK going book hunting in charity shops and secondhand bookshops, and here are some of the treasures that I found on those hunts. We'll start with an author of the Victorian period that you might be surprised I haven't read yet, and that is Anthony Trollope. Trollope is one of those authors that I categorize in my head as an honorable mention to the Victorian canon, which is really unfair to him, but you know what I mean. He's not a Bronte, he's not a Dickens, he's not a George Eliot, but still his Barsetshire Chronicles are a staple of Victorian reading, and many booktubers whose opinions I trust really love them. This is a series of 6 novels that are all set within the fictional English county of Barsetshire. I don't know how interconnected these stories are with each other, but the very first book in the series is one that I found in a charity shop in Chester, and that is The Warden. This was published in 1855. I know very little about it since I like to go into my classics as unspoiled as possible. I sometimes don't even risk a glance at the blurb because the people who write blurbs for classic novels often just assume that anyone who buys this book has already read it anyway or doesn't care about the plot. I do know that this book is set in an almshouse, which is a sort of charity-run boarding house for poor people. I know that this is a critique of such almshouses and generally of the way that the church exerts power through charities. But other than that, I have no idea what the actual plot is. I have no idea what Anthony Trollope's style is. I don't know if he's more of a serious writer or more of a satirist, if this is going to be more realist or more sentimental in style, but I am very curious to dive into this one. With the amount of times this has been recommended to me one way or another, I'm sure I won't be disappointed. The next author I want to explore this year is Barbara Pym, and I don't think there's an author that has been recommended to me more than she has, both in person and in comments here. Pretty much everyone who knows my reading taste says I would absolutely love her books. From what I understand, she wrote social satires set in post-World War II England, and yeah, that very much sounds like, as they say, my jam. Her most popular novel is, according to Wikipedia, Excellent Women, published in 1952. Once again, I know barely anything about this novel except that it's supposed to be hilarious and very frank and set among the upper middle classes of London. There is something comforting to me about mid-century literature, though when it comes to books from the 40s and 50s specifically, I have so far mostly explored the darker, dystopian, post-apocalyptic, zombie apocalypse types. However, I really like these sort of social satire novels of the early 20th century, Nancy Mitford, E.M. Forster, Virginia Woolf to some degree. So I expect I'm going to find a lot of things to like about Barbara Pym. I haven't got a copy of any of her books, but I expect I will procure her most popular novel, Excellent Women, because as you're about to find out throughout this video, I have a philosophy of generally starting with an author's most popular work before I explore any of their other writing. Mainstream? Yep. so what? We are back in the Victorian era with this next author, and this is someone whose name is synonymous with the genre of the sensation novel. I am talking, of course, about Wilkie Collins. He's best known for both The Woman in White from 1859 and The Moonstone from 1868. I love early detective fiction. I adore the Sherlock Holmes books, and I really enjoyed the only other sensation novel I've read, which is Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Sensation novels are the fun little brother to the more serious works we know from the Victorian period. Well, not so little really, because they tend to be massively long books, but they're so different with their convoluted plots, their fast pace, always with a mystery at the heart of the story. My theory is that they're not as well known to us readers today because they're not the sorts of books that are taught and read in school. Which I get, there's probably more teachable moments in a 300-page book about class struggle than there is in an 800-page book about secret bigamy. But yeah, I really love the soap opera style storytelling and the mysteries and the plot twists. I love a book that's a bit camp, that doesn't take itself too seriously. So if Wilkie Collins can deliver on all of that, I think I'm going to have a great time with his writing. I'm not sure which of his books I'm going to read. It's going to be one of the two big ones, The Moonstone or The Woman in White. So if you have read both, please tell me which one you think would be the better first choice. And we're back in the 20th century and talking about our first American author on this list, and that is Edith Wharton. At time of recording, I am currently reading The Great Gatsby by Scott Fitzgerald. This edition is one that I found in a German charity shop randomly. Anyway, this video is not about him, but in my mind, Edith Wharton has similar vibes. And I say that obviously based on nothing because I've not read any of her books yet. But from what I understand, she wrote books about rich people living in New York City in the 1920s. And, you know, I like books about rich people and their sordid affairs. Call me shallow, but I mean, call me shallow if you like, I don't care. So if Edith Wharton's writing is as I expect it to be, then I think I'll like it too. She is best known for her novel The Age of Innocence, which was published in 1920. Like all the other books I'm talking about here, I don't really know much about it. And I don't have a copy yet of this or any other of her works. So this decision is not set in stone because there are some other titles of hers that I have also heard talked about and that I'm curious about. Wharton was clearly a very prolific writer and her bibliography is extensive. Definitely an author I'll browse a bit before I choose what I want to read, though if we're being honest, I'll probably end up with The Age of Innocence. Right, we're staying in 20th century America because my next author is, I think I've got her here somewhere, yes, Willa Cather. I hope that's how you pronounce her name. This is her novel My Antonia, which I'm probably also mispronouncing because it's got a funky little accent on the A. My Antonia? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm so bad at doing book hauls TBR videos because I just don't research the books before I read them. I'm going off vibes alone. Anyway, I found this in a charity shop in Cambridge. But based on the summary, and for this one I did look at the blurb, it sounds like the complete opposite to Edith Wharton. This says, this famous portrait of a pioneer woman unforgettably recalls a rich and uniquely American past. Cather's book has become a legend of American literature, and her heroine, the bohemian immigrant Antonia Shimerda, an ideal version of the Earth Mother. Not entirely sure what a pioneer woman actually is, but excited to find out. This is definitely a more obscure author to me. She's not talked about that much on BookTube, although I know that Hannah from Hannah's Books did a whole video series exploring her life and her writing, which I will link down below. So yes, a bit of a serious read. I don't usually go for the serious books, but, you know, branching out, getting out of my comfort zone, and she sounds like a great author to explore the more serious, maybe sad, maybe earnest side of American 20th century fiction. Now, this next book is one that I also found in a charity shop in Cambridge. It is iconic. However, this edition of it is absolutely unreadable. It is quite literally falling apart. Look at that. Yeah, there's just whole chunks of the book coming out. But still, I could not pass on this. I paid £2 for a book that is falling to pieces. Oh, apologies, £1.50. Anyway, D.H. Lawrence was already on my list when I saw this book in the charity shop. And at that point, I hadn't decided which of his books to read because, like some of the other authors on this list, he does not just have one big hit, but several. The most popular ones are probably Sons and Lovers and this one, Lady Chatterley's Lover. Sons and Lovers is from 1918 and Lady Chatterley's Lover is from 1928. So when I saw this, that was basically that decision made. How could I pass on this? Now, everyone who I know who's read this book didn't like it. So that's not a great endorsement, I have to say, but it is one of the most infamous novels of British 20th century fiction due to its rocky publication history. I don't know much about the plot, except that it's about a rich lady who has an affair with a gameskeeper, and I know that it is notoriously pornographic. Though I don't know what it means for a book to be notoriously pornographic when it was written in the 1920s. I feel like our standards have probably changed since. This wasn't published on a large scale until Penguin picked this up, over 30 years after it was written. And they published it in 1960. And this is exactly that edition. This is the edition from 1960. It says here at the bottom, complete and unexpurgated. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So by the time this was published in 1960, it already had a reputation. Publishing this famously got Penguin into a little bit of legal trouble when they were prosecuted and eventually acquitted in an obscenity trial, which was probably the best publicity this book could have gotten. So yeah, frankly, I have low expectations of this as a story since, as I said, everyone who I know who's read it didn't like it. But I'm still really happy to have found a piece of publishing history, even though it is falling apart. I don't expect I'll actually read this version of the book. I'll get myself the ebook or the audiobook, and this one's just going to sit on the shelf and hopefully not fall to pieces any more than it already has. We are hopping back across the pond for my next author. Honestly, out of the ones on this list, this is the one I am least hyped about, which is a bit of a shame because it's also one of the biggest names on this list. I'm talking about John Steinbeck. If you're talking about American 20th century literature, he's one of the big ones. Like top 5 at least. I found this copy of his novel Of Mice and Men from 1937 in a secondhand bookshop in Liverpool that I can highly recommend if you ever find yourself in the city of Liverpool. The shop is called Henry Bone Books. It's that really classic, traditional secondhand bookshop where the shelves are packed so tight that you're always worried you're going to knock something over, and there's just piles of books everywhere and tables of books, and there's books under the tables, and there's the most random stuff in there, and you really have to dig and hunt because they are not trying to make it easy for you to find the book you want. I really adored it. I spent quite a few hours in there. It's not that large a shop, but you can truly get lost in there. So highly recommended, Henry Bone Books in Liverpool. Anyway, I was meant to be talking about John Steinbeck. I don't really know what to expect from this, except very serious, very earnest, very deep, very, you know, American literature. Probably quite depressing. I don't know. Maybe I'm stereotyping here. This is what happens when you get a booktuber who's going of vibes only. I'm sorry. This is what the blurb says. This is the story of George and Lenny, two itinerant. Wow, this video is really challenging me with words and the pronunciation. Two itinerant farm workers, one of nimble wits, the other of huge physique, whose simple arrangement keeps them in work. But even his best friend and mentor cannot save Lenny from his worst enemy, his own strength. I'm guessing Lenny is the one of huge physique then. Yeah, this says nothing about the plot, doesn't it? We are staying in America with this next author. This is an author who's mostly known as a poet, but has written exactly one novel. I am, of course, talking about Sylvia Plath. I don't get on much with poetry. I've tried a few times and it's not for me. So I feel like it would be unfair to pick up one of her poetry works. So obviously I'm going to read her only novel, The Bell Jar, which is published in 1963. 1963. So that means it's not really a classic by my own definition, which includes only books written before 1960. I have not thought this through, though to be fair, I decided on that definition for myself like 4 or 5 years ago. And I guess as we in time move further away from this date of 1960, maybe the date should also move with us. Maybe I should set my new cutoff date at 1965. Anyway, we're leaving Sylvia Plath in this list, whether she belongs there or not. This is my list, and I can do with it what I want. So, The Bell Jar. I do not have a copy of it. What do I expect from this book? I expect beautiful prose, obviously, from a poet. I know it's about depression. I know it's about declining mental health. I have this idea, and I don't really know where it's coming from, and it's probably so far off the mark. But I have this idea that she might be similar in style to Virginia Woolf. Again, no idea why I think that. So randomly in my head, that's my expectation of Sylvia Plath. Look, I never said this video was going to be educational, okay? The Bell Jar is often considered a semi-autobiographical novel. I always find it a bit tricky when I hear a book described as such, because that sets the expectation that I know anything about Sylvia Plath's life. And the sad thing is that the thing I know about Sylvia Plath's life, and the thing that most people know about Sylvia Plath's life, is her death. And it doesn't seem right to have expectations of this book that are based solely on the one thing I know about her. So I'm going to go into this book without this idea of it being semi-autobiographical, without drawing parallels between what I'm going to read and her biography, which I, as I said, know very little about anyway. I know that she was based in England, even though she was American, so I don't even know where The Bell Jar is set, whether it is set in the US or in the UK or somewhere else. But yeah, I am quite curious about this, and a bit apprehensive, I have to say. We are nearly at the end of the list. The penultimate author I want to talk about is Walter Scott. If there's one author on this list I'm going to procrastinate so hard over, it's Walter Scott. That's because I tried reading The Heart of Midlothian years ago and I could not get further than like 10 pages. I don't even know why. I can't remember anything about the book except that I did not like it and I gave up very quickly on it. Why is he on this list then? Well, as someone with a deep interest in the Regency period, it seems like a gross oversight to not give Scott a second chance. He is one of the big names, both in Regency literature and in Scottish literature, and I feel like I have no excuse. This is another author where I'm undecided about which of his big hits to pick. Do I try The Heart of Midlothian again? Do I have a go at Ivanhoe or at Waverley? There are so many of his works that are big names, you know, that are big important titles. So once again, I'm asking for your recommendations for Walter Scott, especially if you maybe know my reading taste a little bit. Maybe you can guide me towards one of his books that I might actually stick with, unlike the last attempt. His books are all big, epic historical novels. They're often set in the early 18th centuries, although I've seen some of them are set long before that, like in the medieval times. They all deal with some great movement of Scottish history, some historical battles or other political moments in the history of Scotland. Yeah, I really need your recommendations for this one because I feel like Walter Scott deserves a second chance. And we're already getting to the 10th and final author on this list, and that is Amy Dillwyn. She's very much a hidden gem kind of an author. She was a Welsh industrialist, suffragette and social reformer. I would not have heard about her. Despite living in Wales for 7 years of my life, I would not have heard about her without Katie from Books and Things, because she has been recommending Amy Dillwyn for years now. I'll link you to a video in which she reviews her novel Jill, which is from 1884, and that's also the one I'm planning to read this year. This sounds right up my street. Jill is a novel about a young gentlewoman who runs away from home to make a life for herself as a serving maid. So she leaves behind her upper class life to join the working classes, and I'm sure she learns a lot of lessons on the way. This sounds so much fun. It also sounds like such an atypical Victorian novel because it's got this adventure aspect. It also sounds like a young adult novel, you know, like a coming of age novel. All of that just really draws me. It really speaks to me. I don't know why I haven't given Amy Dillwyn a go before now. Just based on Katie's recommendations, she ticks so many of my boxes. An adventure novel with a bit of depth to it, something that's by all accounts is quite progressive for a Victorian novel. Katie talks about her in her feminist and proto-feminist Victorian literature series. If you've read any of Amy Dillwyn's novels, then let me know what you thought of her writing and if I've got the right idea of it. And if you think I should read a different novel other than Jill, then let me know that as well. Right, that was it. My list of 10 new to me classics authors that I haven't yet read, hence new to me, and that I want to read this year in 2025. Are you surprised by some of the names on that list or not? And are there any classics authors that you haven't read yet that you really want to get to, that you really think it's about time? Let me know as well. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.